Hi, I'm Transapient. Apologies for the extended delay in uploads, but I've been rethinking about how I'd like to go about presenting my own YouTube content from here on. This video format is still experimental to me, so I hope it's acceptable. Anyway, on to the subject of this video. On April 23rd, 2019, a YouTuber by name of Omniviewer posted a video in which he proposed an event of sorts for the kaiju fan community in preparation for the release of Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description below so you can check out his stuff for yourself. He's a pretty cool guy and always gives his own honest thoughts on a variety of subjects. Anyway, what he proposed was for multiple YouTubers that focus primarily on kaiju or monster-related content, or just anyone with an interest in the topic, I guess, to select their favorite scene out of a giant monster movie and just do a video explaining why they love it or think said scene is great. Now, I've been a Godzilla and general monster movie fan for pretty much as long as I can remember, so as soon as I heard this, I figured I'd give it a shot. So, without further ado, let's get started. I considered a few different parts from several kaiju movies, and ultimately, the one I decided to go with takes place in 2018's Rampage. I personally think this is one of the best monster movies not part of an established film franchise to be made in recent years. A variety of cool and memorable scenes come to mind, including each of the three kaiju characters' intros. This movie certainly knew how to handle its monsters, and the one I'll be focusing on for this video will be the introduction of the big bad lone wolf himself, Ralph. Fair warning, spoilers be up ahead, in case that wasn't obvious. So, for context, the events of Rampage are kicked off after genetic experimentation aboard a private space station result in a less than desirable situation, which results in the destruction of the station itself. As the station is destroyed, 3 canisters containing a mutative pathogen survive re-entry and land in different locations across North America. One of them lands in southern Wyoming, where it infects a wolf that will become known to weirdos on the internet as Ralph. This particular crash landing is reported as a meteor strike by the media, prompting the masterminds of the company behind the mutagen, Claire and Brett Wyden, to send a team of mercenaries to reclaim their asset before it can be traced back to them. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to be found responsible for a gas that creates monsters either. But when they get there, they find the canister empty and a pack of wolves that has been evidently killed by another of their kind. Realizing one of the creatures must have become infected, the team is given new orders to capture the beast, dead or alive. And from there, well, things go quite south for them, to say the least. Now, we don't get a very clear look at Ralph for much of the scene, but I think it's done in a way that it actually enhances the mood. The first shot of him just tearing through the forest at high speed and not slowed down at all by the trees or fog are already enough to make him feel more like a force of nature than a mere wild beast as soon as you look at him. The team leader must have felt something along those lines too when he momentarily lowers his weapon. You can tell he can tell something's seriously not right. Well, more so. And indeed, that gut feeling is right on the money, because these poor unfortunate souls get totally wrecked by Ralph. I mean, they may have tried to go in with steady heads, but as soon as Ralph breaks in, it's all chaos from there. The presumed roles of hunter and hunted are switched in an instant. These guys had no idea what they were really up against, and they never saw him coming. Another thing I feel makes this intro so well done is its tone and atmosphere. While Rampage as a whole has its moments of levity and sense of humor, the monsters themselves and the damage they're capable of is portrayed with relative seriousness. With Ralph's intro, it's handled with more subtlety than one might initially expect. I mean, despite the fact that a giant wolf is tearing people to shreds, there isn't actually very much blood or gore. And again, there isn't a clear shot of Ralph until the end of the scene. much of the carnage is well enough implied that it doesn't need to linger on the details. As for the atmosphere, this may just be me, but it seems this scene is paying homage to many classic werewolf movie tropes. I mean, look at it visually. The dark woods filled with thick, swirling fog, the group of hunters out to kill the beast without realizing the full extent of what they're up against, the quick switch in pacing from slow, intense to sudden chaos. I mean, this setup could easily fit into a werewolf-type movie. And interestingly enough, I've heard that the monsters were considered to be mutated humans at one point, just like in the original video game early in development. But the concept was dropped because they thought it would have felt more like a werewolf movie than a kaiju movie. So I do wonder whether the similar feel of the final scene that we got was an intentional nod to that other genre or not. But of course, Ralph is far from just a wolf, and the mutagen grants him other abilities besides increased size, speed, and durability. One of these abilities is actually somewhat discreetly revealed in this intro scene itself. It's a brief blink and you'll miss it moment, but right after he ambushes the mercenaries, you can just make out Ralph leaping from a tree in the distance and then gliding through the fog. He does this with patagia membranes that stretch between his legs and are folded tightly against his body when not in use. And I gotta say, that bone-chilling howl of his really helps seal the deal for me. Now, this limited flight ability is said to be another reference to the Rampage video games. Specifically, it's a nod to a monstrous, horrible, unspeakable abomination by name of Vern. Right up there with Voldemort or Vader, isn't it? Anyway, Vern stands for Violently Enraged Radioactive Nemesis. Actually sounds more like Godzilla now that I think about it. But anyway, this bat-like monster was first introduced in Rampage World Tour. In this game, the player would transform into Vern after consuming purple barrels of radiation, gaining more destructive power, the ability to breathe fire, and yes, to fly. Kind of just a power-up, really, you know? So, Ralph's aerial prowess in the movie may well be a reference to this video game incarnation. There are actually many such references and Easter eggs like this sprinkled throughout the movie. Most notably, there's actually a Rampage arcade machine in the Wyden's office. Speaking of the office, I don't know if this might be me looking a bit too deep into things, but just before the chaos breaks out with Ralph as the Wydens observe the mercenaries' camera feeds, you can see a small statue of a dragon on their desk. Could this be like a foreshadowing of Ralph's own flying abilities? Or maybe to the reptilian Lizzie that shows up later in the third act of the film? Or perhaps it's meant to symbolize the Wydens' ruthlessness and greed as villains. Again, maybe it's just me, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless. Speaking of the villains, while Ralph may be the one actually killing people here, the real monsters of the story are further solidified as Claire and Brett Wyden in this scene. Both of them have no care for their fellow man in the slightest. I mean, the guys on the ground are getting shredded, and Brett indignantly exclaims that they should just get it, as if they were merely NPCs in a game failing to do as they ought to. Claire, meanwhile, after seeing what an effective killing machine the wolf has become, coldly declares that the mission is futile, that the pathogen is indeed doing exactly what they designed it to do. Call them one-note villains all you want, but darn it, I think that can be a positive aspect at times. Not all stories require complex villains, which I believe is the case with Rampage. There's enough going on with the monsters that they're just not really all that necessary. None of this, oh, I got this tragic backstory, or represent some opposing philosophy, or this or that, whatever. Just straight up, no good slime balls that get what's coming to them in the end. Anyway, back in the woods, there's soon only one man left on the ground for Ralph to chase down, before he's fired upon by the helicopter. But this only serves to further demonstrate Ralph's aggressive tenacity when, instead of breaking off and trying to avoid the thing that's shooting at him, he now directly targets the helicopter. It all accumulates in an awesome slow-motion shot where we get a clear, unobstructed view of the monster leaping from the mist into the sunlight. Ralph is revealed in all his glory as he takes out the chopper. I love how you can see the rotor blades snapping off against Ralph's hide, further hinting about how tough he really is. And then, as the lone survivor looks on, one of Ralph's legs is made to look like another tree in the background before he bears down on its prey. It's like he's an avatar of the dark, predatory forest itself. And every time I watch it, I also can't help but think how terrible that dog breath must smell. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Ralph's introductory scene in Rampage and why I like it. I think it's well shot, atmospheric, harkens to more classical genres while still being unique, filled with a lot of fun Easter eggs, does a good job framing the monster and the human villains, and just overall entertaining. Those are all my own personal thoughts, of course, so let me know in the comments what you think. What do you think of this scene? Which Rampage monster is your favorite? Are you looking forward to King of the Monsters 2019? I know I am. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching.